Welcome back, everybody. So it's Sunday night, kind of late, and I'm trying to get one more video done. And this video is going to be a little bit strange compared to most videos I do, because it's going to have the highs and the lows of RC flying for me. And I don't ever like to go on negative, but there's going to be some negative in this. But hopefully the positive is more positive. But with that said, I've had quite a few requests over the last year to do a video kind of like this. So let's jump into this instead of me just sitting here yakking. So the highs and lows of RC models part 1. So the reason I'm making this a part 1 and part 2, I'm only going to talk about the experience as a pilot, the about building the plane, all of that, but I'm not going to go into like the highs and lows of the actual construction of a plane. I'm just going to talk about it on a very high level. Once in about a month or two, I'll do a video of like when paint doesn't work, or I use the wrong glue, or I try to cut a part out and it didn't work, or I 3D printed a part and it worked better than I thought or worse than I did. So that video will be part 2. This one is more about the pilot or my experience in RC without diving into the design and building and all of that. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So I gotta tell you, I love this picture here. One of my fans took this 10 years ago, and it's the MSL-1 doing a hammerhead. And if you look at this picture, what's kind of cool is you can see I've really got the aileron cranked in there. If you know in a hammerhead, right as you're getting across the top, your airplane's getting really slow. It shouldn't stop flying. But as it gets slowed, you need more inputs to keep it from torquing. So I love this picture because you see I've got the ailerons cranked all the way in. I've got the rudder cranked hard left. I've got a little bit of down elevator so that I'm not coming back over the top of the hammerhead. But to me, this is the joy of flying model airplanes right here. I love being the pilot. I absolutely love piloting RC airplanes. And yeah, so let's get farther into this. So when I think about where I started with my scratch building, you know, my A-10 was my first completely scratch built plane. I used 7-Up bottles for the nacelles, and it blew me away that I did it. I was so excited. But to think over the years, 30 some, that I would build a 197-inch electric airplane. Well, it started out as gas, but it went to electric because the gas shook it too much. But just the fact that it went to that I ended up going that big of scale aircraft and building it has been so rewarding, so exciting, and it's led me to different avenues I never thought I would have ever done in RC modeling. So now I want to dig into a little bit of the piloting part of it, and you can be a pilot of so many different types of aircraft: helicopters, quads, scale warbirds, park flyers, scale airplanes. And they all fly by the same principles, but they all fly a little different. Like my Avante EDF jet flies like it's on rails. I absolutely love that plane. Now that was an ARF. I didn't build or design or anything, but I just love it. It's one of the best EDFs I've ever flown. But then you fly the MSL-1, totally different airplane, okay? Stick around at the end because I'm going to talk about a fear I have. And as a pilot, I think every pilot should have a certain level of fear when they fly a model airplane, but I'm going to cover that at the end. Before I get too deep, I want to talk about my sponsor, RTL Fasteners. Incredible people. Has every bolt nut you could ever conceivably need on an airplane. Metric, standard, blind nuts, lock washers, servo screws, you name it. Use the super top secret code DA30 and you'll get 30% off your order as long as you spend $50 or more. So I want to get back to talking about being a pilot. For me, flying giant scale, I like it because A, it's a little bit easier than flying the little bitty small planes I've got. It's more majestic to me to see a big airplane fly scale. Okay, one of the reasons I like to build light means my plane can fly at a slower airspeed. If you imagine looking up at a full-scale airplane flying across the sky, it might take a minute or two to pass you. You fly a scale model aircraft by you, and in like 6 or 8 seconds, it's past you. That's not really flying that scale model to scale speeds. So one reason I love building light is I can fly planes around at 35, 40 mile an hour, while other people are taking a trainer around at 55. So that's one aspect of flying. I love to test myself or to challenge myself to fly as scale as I possibly can. You know, a long time ago, there was a video of a B-17, only like 80 inches, 90 inches, but it was doing knife edge, it was doing inverted flybys. Awesome that the pilot loves to do that, but to me, that doesn't look too scale. I would never fly like that. Now, I'm not judging them, but I want my scale warbirds to look scale. Now I want to talk about another aspect of being a pilot. So in this picture, believe it or not, one of my best friends, his name's Eamon. Don't confuse that with Damon. I'm Damon. He's Eamon. One of the best drone pilots I've ever met. But he's flying his drone backwards with a GoPro on it in front of me. We're flying formation to try to get this shot here. And to me, this is one of the greatest. Now, there was some video of this. You can find it somewhere on my YouTube out of the 200 plus videos. But to me, this was just such a cool still frame to get a picture of the front of an RC plane flying about 100 feet in the air. I was trucking along at about 35 or 40 mile an hour because his drone, some of his drones will go really fast, but he really wanted me to try to keep at the speed of his drone. So keep in mind, he's got his FPV goggles on. He's got a GoPro on this, and he's flying backwards, and I'm trying to not run into him because he's always scared of us having a collision. Look, I understand the responsibility as a pilot. If I hit him and I break a prop or damage my airplane, I don't think much is going to bring this thing down, except one thing, and I'll show you that later. Taking pictures like this. Now, I'm piloting along. I just came out of a turn. I'm leveling. You can see my aileron inputs are still in. I'm leveling the plane out. But what's interesting is I have my pilot experience of flying this airplane scale. But imagine my buddy Eamon's experience being the drone pilot that's capturing this type of pictures and videos. It's mind-boggling all the different avenues we have in model aircraft, RC aircraft, that we can all go down. Like I said, there's helis, there's gliders, there's so many avenues that you could go down that once you get hooked, and you've heard me joke before, and I've never done any drugs, but this has got to be like crack cocaine. I mean, model aviation for me has always been like once you're in it, you're in it. This picture here, where we're flying formation and he's coming up behind me. This picture here, where he's on my 7 or 8 o'clock position, about 50 feet above me. We cruise the entire flight line at SEF. Now, this is like day 2 when people are still loading in. But to me, this is one of the coolest videos, and this is a screen grab, but this was just some of the most unbelievable stuff we've done. Just because you're looking down on the airplane, and when you zoom in on it, you can see the pilot in there and all that. It's just incredible. Now I want to talk briefly about building, what it meant to me. Like I said earlier on, I had flown I started with a glider, then built a Gen 80 glider, then built an Eagle 2, went into different airplanes, worked my way up through the SIG airplanes, worked my way through the top flight warbirds into the Byron originals, got through all those planes and started getting bored. Just assembling a kit bored me. So when I started to do my own drawings and do my own designs, this is that yellow airplane, the MSL-2, that you're just seeing in those pictures. And this was the fuselage as I was framing it up. And to me, being a pilot and being able to build is such a close race for me, because when I'm flying, I love it. When I'm building, I love it. My daughter's sitting here holding the right wing of the MSL-1. I sewed the fabric on this like a real airplane because I want to challenge myself and see if I could use the same techniques that they used back in the 20s and earlier. So, this was just so rewarding. And when you think about my boredom that got me into scratch building, it was really, it was the gateway to building my giant scale airplanes. You know, my C-130 I built and my A-10 was what proved to me I could build a flying model from scratch. So if you're a young person and you want to cut some foam up or cardboard, construction paper, whatever you want to do and put a little electric motor on it, a little glow motor on it, go for it. Okay, the worst thing you can do is fail. The most awesome thing that can happen is you learn something and you have a flying contraption. So I don't know how to ever represent the way I feel about this hobby, because there's so much science and geometry and math. There's so much in this, and everybody looks at me like I'm this guru. Believe it or not, I want to keep it super simple. It's a KISS principle for me. Sometimes if the math gets too big for me, I've got a daughter who's incredible in the university right now, and she can do stuff in math. I mean, I never took any of the math in high school. She took when she was like in 8th grade. But I digress. I'm sorry. The thing is just do it. I hate that slogan, but just do it. Then I want to talk about the first flight of an airplane. As you're building the airplane, you are slowly becoming obsessed with it if you're me. Every time I glue something together and it's straight, every time I get to the next step and it's working. Now this is a kit. This was a G&L Hobbies 50% pits. But when I got it to this point that I was getting ready to start putting radio trays and stuff in it, my daughter's like, can I jump in it? And I'm like, sure. So here's a picture of my daughter, Emma, who's 20, by the way, now. She's sitting in that airplane, and I just looked at it, and I thought, who would have ever thought in the hobby I would build a pits big enough my daughter could just jump in it, and it would be almost the right scale. Now, she's not quite half scale there, but her height was, you know, about 3 feet, and she's like 5'6" now or whatever. But it's just funny that the hobby took me here. But the reason I'm talking about the first flight is, as you're building the airplane, I've seen this happen to people, and it's almost happened to me a couple of times. You end up with such a beautiful plane, you are scared to fly it. You are truly just like, oh my God, I spent a year on this. Why am I am I a narcissist? Am I a masochist? Why did I spend all this time when I could crash it? And the bottom line is, you could and probably will crash once in a while. Now, if you followed my pre-flight checklist video, knock on wood, I've gone a lot of years without a crash. So I'm sure I'm getting ready to go to Ceph in a week, which is a big fly-in, electric fly-in. I hope I don't have an accident there. But there's a fear when you put so much time and love into an airplane, that first flight, that sometimes you psych yourself. I have test flown a lot of airplanes for friends. I had a friend build a F4 Corsair one time, and I was checking it out, and I noticed his hand was shaking. I'm like, why are you shaking? I'm test flying it. He's like, dude, I've never detailed an airplane. I've never done the rivets. I've never done any of this. And I said, well, do you want to fly it, or do you want to hang it on a ceiling? He goes, oh no, we need to fly it. And that's what happens sometimes. You know, people have belittled me because I never flew the B-36 or the C-130, and I sold them. And I'll talk about money in a minute. But I will never own a Hangar Queen, a plane that will never fly. Now, selling it to fund the hobby is one thing. But even if the plane sits for like 2 years because I got frustrated with it, it's going to fly one day. So I beg you, don't ever build a Hangar Queen, okay? Unless it ends up being so heavy it's dangerous to fly. I've seen that happen once or twice. But on that test flight day, for me, there's different levels of anxiety. At the end of the day, I feel like I just gone 120 mile an hour on a motorcycle down a country road and had a blast, but thought, boy, that was a little bit dangerous. I could have hurt myself. Now, test flying an airplane, I'm not afraid I'm going to hurt myself. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt the airplane. So I will purposely go through a mental checklist. Now, I've already gone through the physical checklist of the plane. I've already checked my batteries, checked the fuel, if it's gas or electric. Well, electric is the charge. I've checked all of my attachment points. I've gone through the radio, make sure the ailerons are really going left and right. I've gone through that physical checklist, but then I got a mental checklist. And that mental checklist is, Damon, the CG is right, the control surfaces are moving right, the wing loading is light, the plane's going to fly. So just pretend this is like any other flight, but the plane might be a little bit out of trim. And I'm not saying that I meditate that, but if you ever see me test fly a plane, you'll see me walk around for a little bit and just thinking, and then I do the test flight. And once I land, I am so excited, I am so amped up that this is why I love the hobby, because I just created something that flew really cool, okay? So that's one of the biggest highs for me, is that first flight. And then you land. And for me, especially these big planes, it's emotional. It's emotional. And here's the funny thing is, there's a kid I know, a very private kid, and he's built some pink foam airplanes. And him and I share emails quite often. And he built one that really was, I think, brilliant. But a lot of the people he flew with said, that's silly, it's not going to fly. I don't want to talk too much about it because he's shy. So, but think of some paper airplanes we built in the past. Not a conventional paper airplane. Well, I can't say this, but essentially his plane flew perfect. And I could hear in his voice, he was so excited, because we ended up chatting about it afterwards, because he wanted to understand why one of the flying characteristics it was doing it. And I can't tell you any more than that. But I just tried to get through to you. This guy was like 20 years old, higher than a kite, that he had built something by his hands, and it flew perfect. Okay? Now, I want to segue that into people. And I'm not sure if I'll articulate this right at all. So if you crack up or you just turn off here, I understand. But one of the things I was not ready for in model aviation was having somebody say that they're my fan, or that they are excited to meet me. I am just a driven RC modeler. I am no different than any of you watching this, except I have a unbreakable drive to explore and just build. Okay. Now, of course, family's first, work second, hobbies third. But when I started building giant scale airplanes and started going to fly-ins, because people would beg me to go to fly-ins, I wasn't ready for a noontime demo. I wasn't ready for people wanting to come up and say, oh my gosh, it's so exciting to meet you. And I'm looking around like, who are they talking to? Because look, the fact was, when I was first into radio control aircraft, I would go to the club early in the morning, open the combination on the gate, and make sure there's one other person there, because I never want to fly by myself in case, one of my props, because I flew a lot of glowing gas engines, they can be very dangerous. Well, electric can be just as dangerous. That prop is a Ginsu. So don't ever fly by yourself. Always have somebody there that's going to drive you to the hospital, or guide the helicopter in when they got to evac you because you cut your arm off. But I wasn't ready for, I don't want to say I was ever an introvert, but I didn't like to fly around people because I was afraid people would make fun of my flying or critique me, or I would always run into the jerk at the field that knew more than everybody, grew up knowing Orville Wright and all that kind of junk. So when I started going to fly-ins and meeting these people, two things happened. One, it was the greatest part of my life, because I met a lot of like-minded, really cool people that were way smarter than me. I learned so much. I mean, some of my best friends I've met this last 15 years in the RC hobby. So the people are just incredibly cool. When you start to go to fly-ins and they're like, oh, well, you do the noon demo. And I'm like, and I want to talk about that at the end here, about the fear that I have. But to be at a noon demo and said, okay, you got a 4-minute slot, do you have a routine? Of course I've got a routine. And I'll talk about that also at the end, making sure that you don't show up and just do something stupid. But all the people I've met is something that will be with me my entire life. I mean, it's not going to go away. I mean, in this picture here, which I kind of posted because it cracks me up, in the upper right-hand corner are two of my best friends, but they're totally top secret. Can't say their names, but some of the coolest people I've ever met in my life, these two guys right here. I mean, to me, they're my brothers. Bottom right-hand corner, a fan took a picture of me asleep in an oversized lawn chair. I had driven 12 hours to a fly-in. I was exhausted. I got my tent set up, got the MSL1 out, and got it put together, which takes about 15 minutes. And I just thought I'd lay down just for 5 minutes, and I ended up sleeping an hour in that chair. And people just walked by like I was, you know, some kind of zoo animal taking pictures of me. But this is the hobby. On the bottom left-hand corner is a friend of mine named Chris. Him and his dad built a big 747 EDF. Beautiful airplane. Top left-hand corner, I'm putting batteries in my plane for a new demo, and a lot of people are talking to me. But just as a side note, if you're ever at one of these things and you're doing your pre-flight checklist, just ask people to leave you alone while you do it. Because one thing I will not do is talk to people while I'm doing my pre-flight. Because I might forget to put a bolt or a nut in, or God knows what could go wrong. So just be really polite and say, hey, look, can we talk in 5 minutes? I need to check this out, and then we can hang out. So, you know, when I just think of the people I met, that is one of the coolest parts of the hobby. Some of the biggest highs. I mean, but keep in mind the theme here. Everything about RC modeling that I've talked about so far is the positive, which makes up about 98% of my experiences in the hobby. Okay? And then I want to talk about when it all goes right. So in this picture, the reason I love this is that this big fly-in called Seth, some mornings were cool. I'd get up in the morning before anybody was up flying, and I would pull my airplane out and take what I call beauty shots and just get some neat shots. Well, a 12-year-old boy walked up to me and started talking to me. We ended up spending an hour talking, and I just wish I could win the lottery so I could pump so much money into model aviation so these young people felt at home. Because he was telling me that, you know, him and his dad had a lot of fun flying, and they've been building planes, but they've had bad experiences with a couple of clubs. Excuse me. And I told him, no matter what, you could build this airplane. Now, you might be in your 30s or 40s. You might go through a divorce. You might go through some bumps in the road. But you could build this airplane. Anybody could build this airplane if they just want to do it. Okay? They could. So here's another thing when everything goes right. So as you know, my friend Eamon and I like to do air-to-air pictures. People are always saying, what if he hits your airplane? Well, first of all, he's got a GoPro on top of his quad. So the first thing that's going to hit me is the GoPro, not his propellers. But even if we had a collision, the chances he could bring this down would be very remote, except in one maneuver we did, and I'm going to talk about that next. But do you realize how cool it is? You probably don't. We landed to the end of the day because the sun was setting. He downloads the video. He starts pulling some screen grabs. And when he showed me this screen grab, I was just like, this is so cool. You know, I'm flying about 40 feet, about 30 feet off the deck, going down the runway. You can actually see us in the picture down there, but it's too dark to really see it. But this was just the most unbelievable picture that we made. So this is when it all goes right. Now, this was when it all went right, but I got to be honest, this was a little bit dangerous on both of our parts. So we were going to do some maneuvers, and then we were going to do a flyby, like the Blue Angels does. And we choreograph everything. Well, we talk on the ground. We really brief each other how we're going to do this. We just don't get up and go crazy, okay? We try to brief everything Eamon and I are going to do. So I had told him I'm going to fly down the runway about 10 feet. He said, I'm going to fly down the runway about 5 feet and go right underneath you. I said, awesome. So as he's standing next to me and I'm telling him I'm lining up on the runway, he says, I'm lined up the runway. And as he's coming down the runway, he's saying lower. Now, I think he was talking to himself. Like he wanted to get himself lower to make sure he's under my plane. Well, I thought he's telling me to go lower. So now I'm getting lower. And then he's getting lower, so because he's afraid of hitting my airplane. So he's going literally about 18 inches off the ground. My landing gear is about 9 inches off the ground, and he goes right under the wing. And he yelled right as he went under, because he's got FPV. He's seeing all of this, okay? I couldn't even see his drone. I mean, it went by so fast, I never saw his drone. I'm just flying my airplane, because I'm not going to be watching his drone because I'm flying my airplane. He said some words I can't repeat because YouTube will demonetize me if I repeat exactly what he said. And I said, what? He goes, I almost hit your wing. And I'm like, well, you didn't, or I would have heard it. So we landed, we looked at the video, blown away. But that night, it haunted me. Because let's say he did hit that wing and cut the wing off. Okay, I understand the plane would crash. But the plane would have rolled left, away from the other pilots at the pilot stations or flight line, away from the tents, away from the campers, away from all that. But what if he would have lined up under my right wing? My plane could have turned right, and if it damaged the radio, let's say it took out a servo wire and killed one of my S-buses, my plane could have gone toward the pits. So you really need in your briefing to make sure that you know what you're going to be saying to each other. Now, this turned out awesome. This is when it all went right. I know I'm talking a little bit negative here, but this was the coolest thing in the world. And I need to speed up this video. It's going way too long. I'm sorry, everybody. So now let's talk about the last thing of when it all goes right. Nobody in my family wants to fly RC. My son did cars. My daughter did drones a little bit, just one out in the front yard, a little drone I had. But they have no interest in piloting. But they love to be a part of my aviation. They love to go to fun flies and meet the people. But I want to tell you one little funny note. In the upper right-hand picture is my daughter holding a Best of Show trophy for my airplane. And I smiled and accepted the trophy and then gave it to my daughter. But I want you all to think for a minute about these fly-ins. If you have a Best of Show trophy, give it to the youngest person there that has their own airplane that they built. Because there was an 18-year-old kid at this fly-in that built a beautiful airplane. And to me, far more deserved Best of Show, because we want the youth to feel good about this hobby. You know, there's old timers and old farts. I call myself an old fart, which means I'm cool as hell. Old timers are the toxic people I'll talk about in a minute. But here's the bottom line is, I'm not flying model airplanes to get awards. If I wanted to do that, I'd try to build an airplane for Top Gun or the Nats, or to do IMAC and all of that. I don't want awards. I don't even like the trophies, because I want them to go to the younger kids, okay? Now, boy, this video is going too long. So now we're going to talk about the learning curve. This is something that was really hard on me. When I first got into Glow, I didn't know what size engine, what size prop, what size fuel tank, didn't know any of that crap. But there was about 50 years before that of control line, escapement, craft radios, and everything that people already had a knowledge that could help me. But still, it was frustrating. But electric, it's only been modern electric aircraft, ESCs and outrunners, endrunners, all of that's only been around about 15 years. And there's not 50 years experience in that. Even today, when I go to size an electric system for one of my airplanes, is very nervous for me, because imagine I buy the motor, I buy the ESC, and I buy the batteries, and they're not big enough. Well, you can't return them because you've already put them in the airplane and try to fly the airplane probably. So electrics are still very big learning curve. Crashing, it's going to happen. There's two types of crashes as far as I'm concerned. There is the dumb thumbs. Well, there's three, but I'm just going to say, if you build your airplane right and have your radio put in right and all of that, it should never crash your airplane. But you got dumb thumbs and being stupid. I've done both. I had a Sky Tiger as my second powered airplane, and I got way too far out and couldn't see it. As I flew it back, I got left and right reversed, and I pile drived it. There was about a 9.4 Richter scale earthquake. It hit in the ground. They could feel it in China. It broke the carburetor and muffler off the engine. It hit the ground so hard. I mean, I pile drived it right into bedrock. But I had no money. So I had to wait 4 months before I could afford another kit. And then it took me like 3 months to build a kit. And then I could afford another motor engine. So that is one of the things about the negative side for me, is when you crash. Now, you can't get mad at yourself. I used to have an MRC BF 109, it's a little styrofoam, 20 size, I think, German fighter. I used to fly it between pyro lines at a field that we had. And the pyro lines were about 36 inches apart. Well, one day, the pyro line went right through the pilot's face, cut off my vertical stab. There went the BF 109. That's my fault. That type of crash is all on me. Okay? Now I want to talk about the money. And this is something that is different for everybody. People have looked at me and says, "Oh, you're rich." Well, I'm not as rich as Elon Musk. Okay, but I'm not. I hate ever talking about money in the hobby because people always assume you're rich or you're entitled or you're an a-hole. And the thing is that my wife is an ex-bank executive, and she knows how to help me save money. Because I always say I wear that pants in the family as long as she picks them out. So honestly, my hobby exists at the level I'm at because of my wife. But I've run out of money twice. So when I was building the B-36, I'd spent an ungodly amount of money on 6 Hacker motors, 6 ESCs. I think I was doing 8S. It was 2.4, so I had 12 batteries. That right there was like $2,000 or $3,000. Okay? Then I had to buy a generator because in the middle of the B-36, I got the MSL-1 flying. Then I had to buy an $8,000 trailer. All of my money I had saved for about 8 years went away in 1 year. And when the gentleman offered me the money for the B-36, boom, it was gone. It helped pay for the next 2 or 3 years. But everybody's different. You know, I know people that have 1 or 2 ARFs. As long as you're flying, it's awesome. You know I'm kind of abnormal with building these giant airplanes. But if you followed me for the last 10 or 15 years, you understand that I watch every nickel and dime when I'm building these. Money is I don't want to say it's a sad part of the hobby. It's a reality that you've got to realize. Don't ever feel like that you're coming to the field with a small airplane and somebody's got a big airplane and there's an inferiority complex, because size does not matter at all with RC planes. It does with the ego of some pilots, but it doesn't as far as most of us cool people. I'm digressing. I'm sorry, this video is going way too long. So now I want to talk about the people, and this is the negative people, and then we're going to wind this down, okay? Believe it or not, this was one of the most bizarre things that ever happened to me in the hobby. Out of all of the 30, 40 years I've been doing this, this was really bad. I mean, this is crazy, okay? I'm trying to watch my language everywhere because I'm finding out there's a lot of young kids who watch this with their parents. So all of my S-bombs and F-bombs and all of those are going away. And if I got to edit, I'll do it. But I had 5 or 6 people I really didn't know very well on my Facebook said, "Damon, there's a big Warbird and Classics flying. You got to bring your MSL2." And I'm like, I'm not really into going to new fly-ins I've never been to, you know, and I know you got to go to one at least once, but this is a big event, and I don't like big events. It's like one reason I won't go to Joe Nall. Joe Nall is way too big for me. You know, 200 pilots, 300 pilots is the most for me in a fly-in, and to me that's a massive fly-in. Joe Nall is like the Formula One championship at the end of the year, and too big for me. But these gentlemen invite me, finally twist my arm and say, "Okay, Damon, you got to go." So I put on my Facebook. I said, "Okay, I'm going to go to this Warbird and Classics, bring the MSL." Next day, I get an email from a guy saying, "Hey, you can't bring your airplane." And I'm like, "Okay, just tell me why." Literally, it was just an email saying, "You can't bring your airplane. Your plane's not appropriate for this fly-in. Thank you." And I'm just like, wow, this was one of the people running the event. So I put that on my Facebook, said, "Hey guys, I can't come." Well, then they sent me the ad for the fly-in, and at the bottom it says your plane must be of a replica of a real airplane. So I got it. I'm like, okay, the MSL2 is not a replica of a real airplane. It's one I designed in my head to be in like a 1929-ish, 30th racer. Well, then this group of people got really mad and said, well, no, Damon should be able to fly his plane there because it's as scale as you can get. Then another group got mad and said, nope, it's got to be a replica. And I'm sitting here in the middle saying, guys, I don't give a crap. I do not have to go to this thing. It's not even that important to me. And then somebody posts, well, if he's allowed to fly that, I'm bringing my trainer. And to be honest, and I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm putting people down, but everybody become crybabies. Everybody become a whole, and I hate calling people Karens, but everybody was losing their mind, and I'm sitting home going, I don't give a crap. I don't have to go to the fly-in. So then somebody said, and plus that airplane doesn't look anything like a real airplane. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. A real airplane is anything that flies, you ding-dong. So me being me, and I know I took gasoline, poured it on the napalm, and then took the napalm and threw it on a nuclear stockpile. So I photoshopped a picture of my MSL-2 at the 1929 Cleveland Air Races winning first place, okay? And put it on my Facebook, and then everybody's like, that's your documentation. It proves your airplane was real. This becomes so toxic because of a rule. And I'm not saying we don't need rules, because we have to have rules. If it was my fly-in, I would have said we have a committee that will vote yes or no. If we want to vote and say yes, that airplane should be allowed to come, we'll vote yes. And then the committee stands. But me, I didn't care. So be careful. Our hobby has so many different emotional people. And now I'm going to talk about the most toxic kind. And this is a guy named Chucky D. And if your name's Chuck, I'm sorry, you're not this Chuck, because I'm actually using a different name, of course. But he is Chuck Dumbbottom. And Chuck is the person at the airfield that is toxic. And everybody knows I'm a massive fan of the AMA. I'm a lifetime member. I think they are completely ignored for all the accomplishments they've done. But one rule they have, or not rule, but one thing about the AMA that I disagree with is that a club can discriminate that if you fly helicopters, gliders, drones. I had a dad and son email me that they joined a club, was welcomed into the club, then showed up with FPV, and the club goes, you can't fly FPV here. Under the AMA, as long as you got a spotter, you can do it. Well, no, you can't fly FPV here. That's our club rule. To me, they shouldn't be an AMA club because that's discrimination. They refunded their money back and kicked them out of the club. So I don't know what's wrong with some of you people that you think you've got to put your nose in everybody else's business. This hobby is fun. We got to get the young people in it or it's going to die one day. You know, all you Chucks out there are either going to have a chest grabber and drop dead of a heart attack because you just don't care about yourselves. But the bottom line is, if we want this hobby to succeed, we've got to make sure people love it and want to engage it. You know, people will play Call of Duty or whatever they do for 12 hours when they could be building an airplane. So please, people, if you have a Chucky D in your club and they're toxic, pull them aside and say, we won't allow that here. You can't be that way. Now, if it's your club president, you're screwed unless you vote them out. And I know a club that has this kind of a person as a club president, and it's a group of these old dinosaurs that only want to fly a certain amount of airplanes. And if you come in there young and know what you're doing, they're gonna belittle you. Now, this thing has gone on way too long. I want to talk about the fear I have. So as I mentioned earlier, I love flying my airplane, my MSL-2. I love doing maneuvers with it, but they are maneuvers I have tested off with a small group of people. I don't ever practice a new maneuver at a fun fly or during a noon demo. And if you want to know why, it's because of the spectators. Okay, one of my biggest fears of flying model aircraft has never been losing the airplane or crashing the airplane or being out any money. It's hurting somebody. Our aircraft, I've seen helicopters doing like 80 mile an hour doing a 360 right in front of people, and if anything goes wrong, it could be a bad day. I've seen turbine jets fly right at the audience and then go vertical. Scares the hell out of me. You'll never see me fly like that, ever. So what I do is I fly a pattern. I might do a figure eight, might do a loop, might do a hammerhead. Depends on the wind, depends on how I feel. But this is something you need to realize if you're flying a cool airplane. If you've been invited to be part of a noon demo, even though your routine is boring, most of those people behind you have never seen it and they think it's exciting. But what really terrifies me is behind me when I'm flying is somewhere between 200 and 1,000 people. And everything in my mind is keeping my airplane away from people. And if it starts to glitch up, which it never has, knock on wood, but if something started to go haywire, I'm going to fly it away from us and try to land it straight out or land it away from the people. If I got to put it in, I'll put it in. You know, if I'm doing a figure eight and I start to lose control of it, I'm going to chop the power and put the nose down. And if I can't get it under control, I'll fly it into the ground. But all these people, now look at this picture and look, please don't take what I'm saying right. If you've watched the video this long, you care, okay? But I'm not trying to set a new rule or anything. But one thing that frightens me is when I see 6 lawn chairs with a bunch of 4-year-olds sitting in the lawn chairs. Those kids can't get up and run. If you're at a fun fly, watch the airplane. Don't be on your iPad. Because if something goes wrong, you may have to move out of the way. Now, this doesn't happen where anybody's really been hurt. But there have been 4 or 5 planes in the last 8 years that's gone into the pit area. One was 2 warbirds having a head-on, and one went in. Luckily, nobody got hit. Another one was a bomber that had an engine failure on takeoff, or actually the throttle didn't come up. It didn't hurt anybody. But everybody needs to be watching the airplanes during a noon demo. Or if you're up at the flight line and people are flying, watch. Parents, just stay close to your kids, that if you got to yank them out of the way, you could. Okay? I am a safety freak, okay? And my anxieties are getting somebody hurt. So please don't somebody say, oh, well, we need to have a new rule. There's no lawn chairs at the flight line. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying be aware. Watch the airplanes. Don't sit there on your iPhone. Safety first, okay? So that's where I'm going to shut this down. I know this went way too long, everybody, but I've been begged to make a video like this. I hate going negative on the second half. But there is a reality in this hobby that, to me, 95% of it is the most awesome hobby in the world. And that other 5% is toxic. And I know that exists in every hobby in the world. I know it exists just because there are insecure people that feel like they need to be in power. And in our hobby, we don't need that. We just need a bunch of cool cats hanging out with each other and talking about flying. Okay? Sorry for going so long. See you next time. Rock on, be safe. And at the very end of this, I'm going to leave an email, a Gmail, because some of you have reached out and say, how do I contact you? How do I contact you? There'll be a Gmail at the end of this that you can reach out and contact me. Rock on, everybody. Be safe. See you next time. Bye.